Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today I want to talk a little bit about some of the brand new stuff we've been getting for Wishworld. I was actually going to be leaving this till tomorrow, but then we got a flurry of new images and a preview clip coming out for Wishworld, and I just had to talk about this stuff because it's absolutely insane. It's absolutely wild. I have no idea where this finale is going to go. I mean, I have a couple of theories, of course, but it's genuinely insane. Like, some of the stuff going on here is mad. But we're going to get right into it. Subscribe if you're new. That would be greatly appreciated. We are trying to get to 30,000 subscribers, and we've just passed 27,000. So we're less than 3,000 subscribers away. Can we do it before the end of the series? I don't know. But if you could help us, it'd be greatly appreciated. But with that said, let's get right into it. So, first of all, let's take a look at this, which is a preview clip from the One Show. This was first shown on the One Show, and it depicts the two Rani'S atop what I believe has been described as a bone beast, and you can see a bunch of these bone beasts across London. Let's take a look. I'm really glad that, by the way, they're keeping her theme as well, because I really loved her theme at the end, so I'm glad that that is her theme. Immediately want to call out here. Obviously, we've seen through promotional images the costume for the Rani, the new costume for the Rani. I love it. It's like a leather updated version of her original 80s look. But even more significant than that, we actually get a look at her sonic screwdriver. And yes, they have said on the Instagram that this is a sonic screwdriver. And people have also noted that it kind of looks like it's been fashioned after a syringe, which actually makes sense because if you know the Rani, her whole thing is, you know, biology and medicine and stuff. So this actually makes a ton of sense for the Rani. And I will say, I kind of prefer it as a sonic screwdriver over the current one. The current one's grown on me, but man, something about small, sleek sonic screwdrivers looks so much better to me. But anyway, the other thing that's interesting here is obviously Mrs. Flood mentioning, well, I kind of gave birth to you in a way. You know, I am kind of your mother in a sense, which is a very interesting thing. And obviously, we're going to see here. The Rani is not pleased with that notion at all, which I think is absolutely hilarious, very funny. Obviously, they do refer to them as the two Ranis for this clip, in terms of the title of this clip. I do remember, obviously, in Interstellar, the Rani refers to Mrs. Flood as Mrs. Flood, not as the Rani. She says she's a Rani, but she's the Rani. And I can definitely feel that there's going to be some tension here. I get the feeling that the reason why they did the bi-generation is to basically do what Stephen Moffat did with the two Masters back in Series 10, where you have one that's kind of more sympathetic and a little bit more, you know, kind of in touch with like their emotions and like the idea of doing the right thing. And then you have, you know, the Master, or the Rani in this case, who is just absolutely, no, we're going to kill everyone. I don't want to be a part of any of this goodness, which is very, very interesting. Also love that they got her to do the don't forget to click below. I have to say, I love this actress's performance. I think she really embodies the kind of mannerisms and the vibes of the Rani, of the original Kate O'Mara performance, really, really well. I'm really, really impressed with this casting. And I think that you get to kind of have your cake and eat it too this way, where you can have a very classic styled version of the Rani alongside Mrs. Flood's more sympathetic, almost more New Who-esque version of the Rani. Does that make sense? You kind of get to have your cake and eat it with the two Ranis idea. So I actually quite like it. I know that bi-generation is still a fairly controversial concept, but I think if it allows for some fun chemistry and, you know, some tension in the episode, I'm on board. I'm on board, I think. We do also have a bunch of new images that have just been released officially by the BBC. Obviously, I'm taking this from TV Zone for Wishworld, and then obviously it reads the synopsis, which we've already read over. Archie Punjabi and Anita Dobson will appear in the momentous two-part finale, Wishworld and Reality War, which will see the Doctor and the Rani go head-to-head in a monumental battle that will send shockwaves through the universe. In the images below, in the gallery, Archie Punjabi is credited by the BBC as playing a character called Rhea. Interesting. I don't know whether that's just because they didn't want to credit her as the Rani in earlier synopsises, or whether, like, that name is relevant to the plot in some way, because obviously at this point we know she's the Rani, so there's not really much point in hiding it, unless there's more to it. But I want to take a look at these images because they're fascinating. Alright, so first one, we have Mel and the Doctor kind of chatting. What I find notable and interesting about this is you'll notice the Doctor is in kind of very 1950s-esque kind of, bowler hat kind of dress. And it's kind of, oh, they're quaint little neighbours, maybe they're going to play a little bit on Mel being the auntie that comes around, kind of following up what happened, in the 60th with the 14th Doctor. We then get this shot of the Rani in some sort of weird hutch-looking thing, as well as a new costume. Once again, a very nice costume at that. I really like this Rani. I'm really digging her at the moment, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how she develops. Obviously, we have a shot here of Millie Gibson. What I find interesting here is she seems to be the only one wearing contemporary, contemporary clothing, relatively speaking. The Doctor and other characters seem to be in more kind of period clothing, if that makes sense, whereas Ruby's clothing is more modern-ish. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of fiddling about with time here, or, whether this wish world, the idea is to create a perfect society, and the perfect society has everyone dressed very formally and very kind of, smartly. And then we have what is probably one of the most insane details and the most insane bits of information we can glean from these images. The Doctor is with Poppy and is basically feeding her what I assume is like jam toast, and he's got a bit of jam stuck on his nose, and this is implying that in this Wish World reality, the Doctor is the father to Captain Poppy. Now, I don't think that this means the Doctor is Captain Poppy's father in real life. I think that this is a bizarro alternate timeline type scenario. And as well as that, we see Belinda, again, in very kind of period appropriate clothing. The telephone as well is very kind of 1950s kind of phone. And it appears like they are the mum and dad of this household, which is very, very interesting. So the theory that I've seen going around that makes the most sense here is that Wishworld will delve a bit into Conrad's ideal reality, his ideal world, because as we know at the end of episode 4, he said, I reject your reality. So basically what the Rani's allow him to do is create his own version of reality that works exactly how he wants it to. This explains why everyone is in 1950s clothing and they're all in very traditional kind of roles, like obviously the Doctor is a mum and dad to a baby. It's all very kind of traditional kind of sort of stuff, and I think that's what they're going for here. This is his view of what society should be like, and basically they are living it out. They are living out his ideal version of reality. Oh yeah, and also interestingly, on the Doctor Who socials, there's been a thing that says, like, tables don't do that. So there's something going on with tables. I have no idea what. We see that Mrs. Flood is also acting as a member of the new kind of police force of this reality. Again, you can see, like, a new sort of crest, which again implies, an alternate reality of some kind. And then, interestingly, we see a bunch of images of Conrad in very kind of, again, almost kind of World War II-esque, your country needs you type posters. But obviously we can see here Millie, Shirley, and somebody else in very kind of, again, contemporary, but also kind of downtrodden-ish clothes. So it makes me wonder if the people that don't fit into his ideal society get kind of, like, I don't know, forgotten about in some way, and that's why, like, we see Millie Gibson looking distraught, likely at the fact that her former boyfriend is now Emperor of the World, which, happens to the best of us. We see Colonel Ibrahim inside what looks to be a, like, alternate reality version of Unit. Once again, very 1950s kind of style, old typewriters. There's a CRT with Conrad on it. Again, very World War II type poster. Don't let your mind wander. It's very clear that Conrad has control of the Earth here, which is very, very interesting. And by proxy, Unit. I don't know what this thing is, but it looks awesome. Obviously, we can see here a clock, and it was said in the synopsis that midnight was relevant to the finale in some sort of way, as in the time midnight, not the midnight entity. But that makes me wonder, if they're deliberately counting down to midnight, what's going to happen at midnight? Maybe it's like a wish upon a star type scenario where if you wish at midnight, then it becomes permanent. Maybe that's what they're going for here. Very interesting stuff. We have a look of Conrad reading a book. And hang on, I only just noticed this. He's reading a book about Doctor Who. Wait, so is Doctor Who a fiction within this world? Interesting. Very interesting. I hadn't even clocked that. My mind is racing with the theories. And then we have a shot of Shirley alongside some other disabled people, kind of in some sort of barracks as well. So it looks like maybe that's where they're held out. You know, maybe in this kind of turn left type scenario where, you know, everything's kind of gone wrong and they're just sort of forced into, you know, these terrible conditions. Very interesting. And we also have Susan Triad reprising her role as the tea lady from Devil's Call, which incidentally is also 1950s. So even she is being reset back to her traditional role as, you know, like an old tea woman, basically, which obviously the last time we saw her, she was working at UNA. I doubt that she would just be making the tea, and in fact, at the end of Empire of Death, it specifically said that she shouldn't. So this is obviously another indication that this is the Bizarro world. We're basically doing Inferno crossed with Mark of the Rani crossed with Night at the Museum with all the bone dinosaurs, and I'm in. I'm in for it, man. This looks crazy. And then we have the Doctor and a lot of the unit sort of crew members looking out the window, sort of smiling up at something. No idea what it is. Susan Triad's also there. And we can kind of see, even with like a unit here, obviously, you know, Kate Stewart is very, you know, differently dressed. Again, you know, different timeline stuff going on there. I will say, obviously, we know that there is a third member of the Unholy Trinity, because Russell T Davies said that the Rani only counts as one member of the Unholy Trinity. So this isn't our full Unholy Trinity here, but it makes me think, who is that third member? I might actually do a video tomorrow talking about just that. But I also think that this alliance between the Rani's and Conrad is probably not going to last, because I was thinking about this. Conrad's whole thing in Lucky Day was that, you know, he was kind of like, you know, like a right-wing grifter type, and his whole thing was, you know, he was kind of condescending, and he didn't want to trust what he was told, and he was very kind of, you know, rude to Shirley and stuff. So I don't know whether he'll be happy to be bossed around by two women. I feel like something's going to happen there, and the fractures will start to show in this kind of uneasy alliance. Who this third member is, I don't know. I'm probably going to cover that in a separate video, but I definitely think this alliance will be tenuous. But I'm very excited by all of this stuff. Okay, apparently the creature that I didn't know was called the Seeker. So is that maybe like their way of kind of monitoring everyone to make sure that they're doing as they're told, doing as they're instructed? We also have a couple more images here that I didn't cover, obviously. This one has Verada with baby Poppy. We also have this one of the Doctor in the old school unit offices, as well as the Rani holding another mysterious baby, who I'm also going to be talking about who I think this could be in another separate video. But I wanted to cover all of these because, boy, there's been a lot going on. But I was also just thinking about the storybook thing, and actually, interestingly, in the Unleashed preview of Wishworld, it does seem like he's telling everyone on the street stories of the Doctor and the Rani fighting, but then how the Rani decided that they wanted to be friends. So I guess that ties into the whole story thing. Space Babies, Poppy does refer to the Doctor as Daddy, you know, thinking he's the dad in Space Babies. So it does kind of feel like the stories of Doctor Who are blending together to create this new world, this kind of alternate world, potentially the Underverse, which was implied in another synopsis that we've read. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for the support on today's video as well. It's not really something I usually do, and I'm probably not going to make too much of a habit of doing, but I wanted to cover this because obviously there was a bunch of new stuff coming out, and I was really excited to share it with you all. So if you did enjoy the video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.